Maura Healey took office as governor last week, and her first official act was to sign an executive order creating a cabinet-level climate office headed by Melissa Hoffer. The order also requires that a climate officer will be appointed in every executive office. In so doing, Healey declared there was no time to waste because, quote, the climate crisis threatens every aspect of Massachusetts life. On the podcast today, we're talking to two people who take a keen interest in such matters as the chairs of the legislature's Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee, Representative Jeffrey Roy of Franklin, the House Chair, and Senator Michael Barrett of Lexington, the Senate Chair. Welcome to both of you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Good to be here.
Representative Roy, let's start with you. How do you expect the state's approach to climate change to change under Maura Healey, and sort of how the legislature will interact with her as opposed to Governor Baker?
Well, I will say at the outset, I don't expect it to change. We have been quite aggressive in addressing climate change over the last several years, going back, when the Green Communities Act came on. So we've been quite aggressive. I do expect that she's going to raise the bar a bit, and I can tell you there were at least two people who jumped up at some of her remarks in her speech, and I'm talking about my friend Senator Barrett and myself, because we were excited that she made climate change and these issues a priority, and the appointment of Melissa Hoffer was certainly a signal that she's taking this matter very seriously and knows that time is of the essence. So very exciting. I am looking forward to working with a new administration, some new ideas and some new faces, because it's so important that we address climate change and turn over a much cleaner world to the next generations.
Senator Barrett, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I do think that there was a significant amount of cooperation with the Baker people, but we also had serious policy differences, and some of them did relate to the different philosophical foundations of the two major political parties. So you're going to see more synchronicity. You are going to see us singing from the same hymn book more often. That's point number one. There's philosophical congruence here. But point number two is that there were some deficiencies in the Baker approach. I did not see MassDOT, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, really buying into the climate issue in the way that I might have hoped. When you read the Baker iterations of the plan for Massachusetts 2030 on climate, or for 2050, you don't see many fingerprints left by the Executive Office of Transportation or the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. So this creation of a climate chief with an explicit mission to range across all the executive branch offices really is significant. And what I'm prepared to see is more buy-in outside the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, which has always had the core mission here, than I've seen in the past.
So one of the things about her approach in a general philosophical way is not very different from what Governor Baker had, which is to electrify as much of the economy, the infrastructure, everything that we can to electrify it, and then make sure that our electrical generation is green, is clean. And so that's Baker and you folks in the legislature have led the way on that, but it's of late been a bit of a challenge to push projects across the line, let's say. And so offshore wind, I think the state's authorized to procure 5,600 megawatts of offshore wind over a time period. Healey has talked about doubling that target. What is that going to mean? Senator, why don't you go first? What is that going to mean for the state to say she's going to double that amount?
Well, first of all, I think Jeff and I would welcome the more aggressive goal setting, but it does pose some challenges. There are several questions that immediately pose themselves. One is, Are we going to be building in the shallow waters of the Atlantic coastal shelf where offshore wind can rest on solid ground below the ocean? Or are we going to be going into the Gulf of Maine where the waters are deeper and where the installations might need to float atop the water? The second issue is, are you going to pioneer in forming true development partnerships with other New England states? And this is where Melissa Hoffer, I think, is going to play a key role. She's going to be our ambassador at large to other states in the Union and to Washington, D.C. That role hasn't been played in as strong a manner as it might be. And then the third issue is, are you going to create competitive procurements so that you get a little competition going that between and among offshore wind, onshore wind, large-scale solar, large-scale hydro? We probably need all those developers vying against one another for the next 2,400 megawatts, let's say, in order to keep the prices down. I like what the Baker people did at the very end, and what I suspect the Healy people are interested in, and that's our moving away from offshore wind only development to a larger environment in which all clean energy competes to do the job for New England consumers and for Massachusetts consumers in particular.
Representative, I remember talking to you, I think it was the last year, about a measure, I think it was put in one of the bills that sort of opened up what Senator Barrett's talking about, a reference to this onshore wind project in Maine that the state has now indicated an interest in buying in on that. And at the time, I remember talking with you, you said there was also some possibility of buy-in purchasing of a share of Millstone in Connecticut, the nuclear power plant. Walk me through. I know we talked about it at that time. Now it seems to be happening a little bit. How's it going from your perspective?
Well, look, I was absolutely thrilled that the administration moved forward with that onshore wind project up in Maine. It looked like a great opportunity for both the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the state of Maine. And it was regional cooperation. I will admit, at the early discussions, I was a bit concerned. And in fact, I had a conversation with the Senate president up in Maine, and I said, didn't you folks just vote to prohibit a transmission line running down the western part of your state? And how can you tell me and convince me that a transmission line down the eastern side of the state will be well received? He made a convincing case. It's different geography, and there were some much easier ways to transmit along the eastern side. So it seems like it's going to work out. They've got some successful bids. Massachusetts is poised to get 40% of that energy. It's a great example of regional cooperation. The area where I was a bit disappointed was that they did not go forward with any purchase of the nuclear power, which Millstone has available. The state of Connecticut did a long-term contract of 10 years at 4.9 cents. And granted, Massachusetts was not going to get that energy at 4.9 cents. But when you compare it to what we're facing right now with natural gas, it should be competitive. And I would have liked to have seen that as part of that solicitation that the administration done. But, I do agree that we need a menu of options. What we're trying to do is replace approximately 50 to 60% of energy which comes from natural gas today. And we need to replace that. And all of these renewable sources are vital for us to replace that fossil fuel mix that's in our current energy supply. So I applaud the administration. But as you recall, it was a legislative directive to do that as part of the clean energy and offshore wind bill that we did in August. And we gave them a very tough deadline of December 31 of 2022, and they met it, and happy about that.
So just to follow up a little bit, the millstone, did they consider it and reject that idea as far as you know, or did they not even take it up?
I was told that they considered it. I didn't see any evidence that it had been rejected. I would have liked to have seen something in the letter indicating what they thought about that as a prospect, or any reason why they didn't include it. But hopefully, with the next administration, perhaps that issue can be revisited.
So, Senator, you raised this issue of, well, both of you have, about regional procurements, basically, of clean energy and bringing more types of energy into the process to make it more competitive. Help me out. How would that work? Because would some private entity or some governmental entity sort of act as a clearinghouse, and everybody else would bid in through that, or who would take the lead on such efforts?
I think as a practical matter, it has to be a vanguard state. Massachusetts did take the lead with respect to the onshore wind project that Jeff was just referencing. Maine needed a partner. Maine can't consume 1,000 megawatts of electricity generated by offshore windmills in Aroostook County up there. It needs a partner in order to make Maine's internal consumption viable. So the Massachusetts decision to take part, which was a legislative initiative, although it was also, no question, urged along strenuously by the Baker folks, that made the entire deal viable even for the host state itself. So when we talk about regional cooperation, we're not requiring all 6 states to buy in. If New Hampshire wants to continue to lag in almost all these important respects, let it fall behind. We're talking about states that are determined to clean up the grid. It could be Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Maine, ideally New Hampshire. And the state of Massachusetts, and Melissa Hoffer in particular, can take the lead. Now, another aspect of her job, I assume, is external relationship building with the Biden administration and with the Democrats in Congress. You got a lot of federal money. There's no guarantee that Massachusetts gets its proportional share, and ideally a little more. Some of the grants are formula driven, but some are competitive grants. So seeding a shop of grant writers proposing that Massachusetts really move out ahead is our best guarantee that we can get a generous proportion of that federal money. And that's going to, I assume, be the new climate chief's within her portfolio of responsibility as well.
So, Representative, maybe you can carry this a little bit further. I'm still wrapping my head around the state going out and procuring offshore wind. It seems to be having a hard time. We'll get to that in a minute, having a hard time pulling some of these off. But now if you open it up and say, we want to bring various types of energy into the mix so that they're sort of bidding against each other, would a state put out a procurement and open it to whoever wants to bid? Is that what the thinking is? And what do you think?
Well, it's, I think the main example is a perfect example of how this can work and how it can work successfully. The folks in Maine reached out to Massachusetts and said, we have this area in northern Maine that is former timberlands, that's barren land. It's got very robust wind, and we believe we can create a wind farm, but we can't do it alone. We need cooperation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And what a perfect partnership it can be. And the letter from DOER, I think, spells out how it can work for both of us. I'll go back to the idea of Millstone in Connecticut. The folks from Millstone entered into a long-term contract with the state of Connecticut. We learned about that. Actually went down and visited the plant itself to see, what options were available, and encourage the administration to look into whether or not they can come up with a regional procurement from the state of Connecticut. And other opportunities that are out there, I think we need to take advantage of. And I think regional cooperation at this level will be helpful for us in the regional cooperation that we are going to need to really rebuild the transmission system throughout ISO New England. If we can't cooperate as states, we'll be really behind the eight ball on the myriad of transmission issues that are out there today. So I like these approaches, and I think they will be helpful in the long run as we analyze opportunities. I can also point to failures of regional cooperation, and one would be the TCI initiative that, Massachusetts was out front on it, and one by one, other states began to lose interest, and we were left hanging by ourselves, and we had to drop that. And getting the hydro from Quebec.
Let me just say that we do want the feds help as well, and there's a role, right, Jeff, for them to play.
Absolutely, the federal government, that money.
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, can do a lot of good in terms of encouraging regionalization. ISO New England, which is a creature of FERC, can do a great deal. Our congressional delegation can help out a lot. So there's no question that we need the feds to come in, but at the same time, Massachusetts can take point and be in the lead.
So let me ask you, you two, about offshore wind, because two of our biggest players, Avangrid, which is helping to build Vineyard Wind, the first one, seems to be going okay so far, but their Commonwealth Wind project, their Connecticut project, Park City Wind, and Mayflower Wind has two projects as well for quite a bit of power, are both in trouble because they bid them last year and they signed deals in May, and now they're saying that the economy has changed so dramatically with rising interest rates, inflation, supply chain difficulties, and the war in Ukraine, that they can't finance their projects. Mayflower Wind's been a little iffy, but Commonwealth has been pretty clear. So, and I think this is happening in other states as well. Other states are looking at, in future procurements, maybe building in a inflation adjuster to sort of deal with these hiccups if they occur. I don't know if that would require legislative action, but I'm wondering if you guys are supportive of that or where you stand.
Well, let me just say, if I could, that and this may be a contrarian position, the world is a different place. The war in Ukraine could not have been anticipated. The impact on natural gas prices in Europe and the attraction of LNG towards Europe and away from New England, which relies on LNG for winter heating, could not have been entirely anticipated. Supply chain disruptions are real. So on the one hand, you don't want to let these developers exploit you and cite these recent trends in order to get a better deal. But you also have to acknowledge that some things truly are unprecedented. What I'm interested in is preserving competition for the next round. You only have two companies, their names are Ørsted and Equinor, available to bid if you bar or penalize Avangrid and Mayflower, which is largely a company driven by Shell Oil. You probably want all four in the mix just to preserve a modicum of competition. So even though you're upset about Mayflower and Avangrid, you could probably find a way forward that looks something like this. First of all, you might want to impose a money penalty on Avangrid for if it chooses truly to default and to step back from performing a contract that they've signed. You may want to impose a similar money penalty on Mayflower. That's separate, though, from deciding whether or not to bar them from competing in the next round. You may want to assess points against their bid in the next round. But fundamentally, you want to keep as many of these offshore developers in the race as possible. And Ørsted and Equinor by themselves, the two non-defaulting partners potentially for Massachusetts, don't comprise enough competitors in and of themselves. So this is an argument for making sure that the Avangrids of the world don't go forward without suffering some kind of burden, but keeping them all in the mix. And I would finally say this, that what I'm talking about is the least objectionable of a series of suboptimal options. We wouldn't ideally have wanted to see default at all. But if we're going to see it, it is sensible to have a new procurement, add the megawatts into the mix that are now under the threat of default, put that together with a bid for additional megawatts, because remember, we have a total goal here of 5,600 megawatts of offshore wind already authorized by the legislature. We need to put as many of those out for bid or out for rebid as possible, have as many players competing to give us a good price as possible. And somehow we want to mediate between not wanting to give the defaulters an easy out, but also recognizing that the world is fundamentally different for all of us and for all businesses and for all enterprises.
Representative, how do you respond to the problems that the offshore wind developers are having right now? And is there a role for the legislature to get involved in any way?
Well, I think first off, I'm going to say I agree wholeheartedly with Senator Barrett that we need multiple bidders on this, and I'm not in favor of banning Avangrid from bidding on a future contract. I am concerned that the prospect of default is out there. I do understand the nature of the default. I've yet to see the actual numbers. I've been talking to the folks over there to say, hey, show us the actual numbers and how you modeled where you made your bids and how you fell short on that analysis. So I want to keep the conversation going. We also are in the middle of a transition to a new administration, so we wanted to get some feedback from the new players who are in this space. We all understand fundamentally, and this I can't emphasize more, we need clean, robust, renewable energy to replace the fossil fuels. And we have set some hard and fast goals to getting there. So it's without question that we need the offshore wind. We don't need companies making promises that they can't keep, but we do need to get robust renewable energy. So I'm all for moving forward and working with these companies so that we can do that and achieve our goal. Again, I agree with Senator Barrett. We are not going to get exploited. And I think the latest DPU order suggested that they didn't see the data about how the bids fell short, and that's why they rejected the motion to dismiss. So there's more conversation to be had, but most importantly, we need at least 4 bidders at the table so we can have competition, so we can get the best price for our consumers on energy moving forward, and renewable energy to be emphasized in moving forward.
And Representative, just one last thought on that. One of the key things that the House particularly has pushed, but both the Senate and the House, is bringing economic development into these bids in a way. And Commonwealth Wind, let's face it, they have put up a lot of effort in terms of securing a factory in Somerset and redoing the Salem waterfront to accommodate offshore wind. Those were pledges that they made in conjunction with this deal that is now in jeopardy. Are you worried that those could all go away?
Of course, it's a concern, but I've also spoken to some of those representatives who are prepared to go forward despite the potential default of Avangrid, because they see, for example, the manufacturing facility at Brayton Point. they understand that along the east coast of the United States of America, there are going to be a number of offshore wind projects, and they're going to have enough work to do over the next 10, 20, 30 years that it's still a viable operation for them. The port in Salem can service not only the Massachusetts projects, but it's uniquely positioned to cover any projects that are in the Gulf of Maine. So there's still some viability to those projects. And, you know, if Avangrid doesn't proceed with its project, there's going to be another company behind them that will do it. So there's work to be done. And these economic development projects, which are vital and something that we really wanted as part of a package from these industries, I think is going to remain. And I'm looking forward to seeing new bids coming in this spring and summer to see if they truly offer additional economic benefits for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Because, you know, we see this as a huge opportunity, not only to get clean, renewable, robust energy, but we also see it as creating a new industry, as creating jobs, as creating opportunities that Massachusetts is uniquely positioned to provide, and want to keep seeing this growth happen.
All right. Well, Representative Jeffrey Roy of Franklin and Senator Michael Barrett of Lexington, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Happy to be here.
And to our listeners, we'll see you again next week. Thanks so much.